environment with publications and with funding. So data deposit is becoming a bit of a new normal. And this is where we actually do the most work to prevent data loss when a project is completed. Again, not all data has to be open. There are data repositories that provide mediated access, and there are also sensitive data repositories that aren't in a cloud at all. They're in a secure storage on a secure servers. The more security you get, the higher the cost. Most of our data repositories right now are intended for open data, and as a result, they have lower costs associated with them. Depending on where you are in your research journey, you may want to consider the benefits of your data being discoverable and tracked by view and download metrics. And as well, you can use data deposit to link your data to your publications, which can drive views to your data, and it can also drive views to your publications. So they do work pretty mutually. And again, this is becoming more common with publications. Most of the consultations I've done recently about data deposit, it has been because the publisher is saying the data must be deposited in a repository, and not so much for funding purposes. And yeah, data deposit also encourages the reproduction of data, which of course benefits open science, and it fights the reproducibility crisis that especially the science community is facing. So where Archer provides supports is data deposit can feel like a very steep learning curve. So I provide instruction on the types of repositories that are available, depending on the type of research data you've collected. So if you're doing a lot of work with, say, code, there's repositories very specific to computer code. If you're doing work with lots of quantitative style data, there's repositories for that. So I can help you navigate the world of repositories. The other thing I do is I provide advice on choosing a repository and prepping your data. So there's a couple of key areas that we look for to make sure a repository is a good one, it's reputable, and so on. So I can walk you through that. And I can also talk about your rights as a researcher when you put your data into a repository. And then get into the basics of like, well, what do you need to do? How much data do you need to deposit? What is required? So the prepping your data. I also provide instruction and support on using the Borealis Dataverse. That is our institutional data repository. And I provide guidance on data curation and preservation. So in some cases, you may think, oh, I just put my data into this repository, it's done. There's a little bit more work to it depending on what repository you use. So some actually do provide curation and preservation services, which means you just put your data in, they take care of it. It's recommended you check in on it at least once a year. In other cases, repositories are, as a researcher, you are responsible for making sure that none of your files became corrupted, all your metadata is up to date, so on. So I provide guidance on that. All right, so that's the end of my slides. I'm going to get into what this looks like on the website and how you can access these services. So I'll just jump over. So we're under the research tab. And I'm going to start with the data repository first. So if you click on that, you're taken to the Borealis data repository. So I always recommend, if you are interested in Borealis, please make a meeting with me and I will give you a detailed, it takes half an hour to an hour walkthrough of Borealis, and I'll show you how to upload data, what you need to consider, what to enter, and so on. And like permissions and all that, all the nitty gritty things. If you have to do something more quickly, we do have an excellent user guide designed by Borealis that contains all this information as well. And then there's also learning modules. So Borealis has made quite a few good webinars that do the same things. It just depends on Do you want to talk to someone who works at your institution and who can problem solve live pretty quickly with you, or do you want to do it on your own at your own pace? So this is what our Dataverse instance looks like. So you can see we have 56 openly available data sets in here. We have partnered with one of the air quality nonprofits, so quite a bit of the data comes from Great Plains Air Zone. But if you click on a data set, what you'll see is the first thing you get is citation information, which is quite useful because it is standard practice. If someone uses your data, they are to cite it and give you recognition in their work. And most repositories create a DOI so that you can get that linkage and citation. And it also makes it easier to link to your publication. So you'll get the citation information. There will be a description. There will be subject notes you can put in, and then you can also put a license or data use agreement. If you are thinking about that, please get in touch with me because license and data use agreements are very interesting and complex and usually require a one-on-one discussion, but it is something that's available. And then what you'll see is the files. In Dataverse, you can restrict access to files, which means people can't just instantly download them. This user has chosen not to, so you could download the files right from there. If you did restrict them, they would be prompted to get in touch with you to get the permissions. You can also see metadata. If there's any terms, so this one has a CC BY 4.0. And then another key thing is you can see version control. So if the researcher has had to go in and make changes, or they've had to like add a different data set or retract something, you'll see that in there, or they should if they're doing things properly. So that's one of the reasons why these repositories are so useful, because you do get the version control, you do get the metadata, and you can track all of it. Yeah, the main thing is if you really want to get into Dataverse, there's a lot that Dataverse can do for you, but it's really better to do it kind of one-on-one so that we can talk about how Dataverse can work for your particular data. All right. I have to get myself back. There we go. So we're back on the web page. I'm going to then take you to the data services page. This is my hub of knowledge, all things data, because the other thing I do is I do a lot of data retrieval. So if you need like StatCan data or anything like that for a research project, you can get in touch with me and I can get that data for you or help you find it. But we're just going to go to the research data management page. And this is where I keep all the useful links and resources that we'll be going over. And again, it's kind of broken down on where we provide the services. So for plan, we have the links to the DMP assistant, exemplars, templates, so on, additional information to consider when making a data management plan. And then for deposit, again, another link to Borealis. The Federated Research Data Repository is another option. It's really useful if you have large data sets. That's where it's beneficial. It's got a little bit more of a steeper learning curve than Dataverse. So if you are going to use it, I do recommend getting in touch with me. And then we also have other data repositories depending on your subject area or discipline and the practices and standards within those subject areas. And this is the really useful section on if you're going to deposit data, just some things to keep in mind about choosing a data repository and also what your rights are as a researcher when you're depositing data. All right. So I'm going to hop back to plan and I will show the DMP assistant. So this takes you to the DMP assistant. It is a free resource. You will have to make an account. And it shows you how to do a data management plan. And it also has instruction guides on how to make a data management plan. And if you're curious about what that would look like, I will, you know what, I'm just looking at the time. I'm not going to log in. I'll jump to the Digital Research Alliance of Canada page and show you the templates and exemplars. So a lot of the resources and funding for RDM in Canada comes from the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. And this is where a lot of the great resources come from. So if you went to their main page and then looked at learning and training resources, there's so many things you can choose from. I'll go into DMP templates, and then you can see all the example templates that have been developed so far based on certain types of research. So this is an example of what a data management plan looks like. When you use the DMP tool, it is just boxes where a question pops up, you type in your text, you save, and when you're done, you get a nice PDF like this. And this is a very standard template. It's used by almost every institution in Canada. So it will be very consistent if you're working with other researchers at different institutions. And because this is a template, it provides more advice than examples of what you would put in here. But the main thing with DMPs is what you put into them is what you get out of them. So I have seen DMPs that are 2 pages because that's what the researcher needed. I've seen DMPs that are 10 pages, but that was also what the research team needed and wanted. In that case, it was a very complex research project where they were working in 5 different geographical areas and they needed that level of detail. But essentially you're asked some just very consistent questions about, hey, what file formats are you using? Or do you have any specialized metadata you need to consider? Where are you going to save your data? How are you going to back it up? Do you need to consider specialized storage, so on? So DMPs are very individualized, even though the questions are all the same, and they are really useful, and especially for getting discussion going. All right, so with that, I think that's everything I'm going to cover. It can be incredibly overwhelming to get into all the nitty-gritty details of research data management. So if you do have follow-up questions, if you want to see something in more detail, just get in touch with me. We can have a meeting. Zoom is always a little bit easier because then I can just share a screen. But I do also do in-person meetings as well. And yeah, are there any questions for Cara or myself?
There'll be questions once we end the call.
Yeah. Well, with that in mind, the best way to reach me is through email. And if you can get on the library webpage, you will probably find my email on there in at least 10 places. But the main thing is there is a listing of all the staff members and faculty members in the library, and it does have all our contact information. Cara, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, email would be best for me as well, just to do a lot of instruction and appointments and such with students. And we do, I think, find that with this kind of research support, it often does come down to that individual one-on-one, because the projects are so different, you know, depending on the discipline people are working in. So certainly don't hesitate to reach out if you want to talk further about the specifics of your project and how we can assist you.